Welcome, everyone, to Unsafe Space. I'm your host, Carter Laren, and I'm joined by Keri as normal, but we are
Hello,
all... Oh, wait
Carter.
a minute. I hear an advertisement in my ear, and I have no idea why. Oh, it's from my other computer. That's a great intro. Anyway, we're excited to talk to Gary Buechler today from Nerdrotic. This is take 2. We totally screwed up last time. It was my fault. We had an old computer that was literally just dying in the middle of the interview, but we have a new, sparkly, shiny, brand new computer. Gary's the CEO and host and founder of Nerdrotic. After founding and running the Comic Outpost, which was a comic book store in San Francisco, Gary launched the Nerdrotic Network. His channel covers the good, the bad, and the ugly from the current state of pop culture with an affinity for genre TV like Lord of the Rings, on Amazon, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Orville, The Expanse, Westworld, The Witcher, Umbrella Academy, and The Venture Brothers. Gary is the co-host of The Inquisition, Friday Night Tights, and The Exozone. His pronouns, very important, are who, what, me? And you can follow him online at nerdrotic.com. His YouTube channel is Sutra Watchtower. He's got Twitter, Nerdrotics, Parler, Nerdrotics. We'll put all the stuff below, all the links below, so you can follow him there. Gary, welcome to Unsafe Space, and thank you for being patient with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Finally,
I am so excited to finally have you on our show. And you should know you've been a very requested guest. And there's a ton of people in the chat already I can see who are fans of yours because they're all saying hail.
Hail.
What is
yes.
that?
Hail actually comes from, I would say, Doomcock. A good friend of mine, Overlord DVD. He's a YouTuber. And when he started, he did his future ruler of Earth thing, and everybody started going hail Doomcock. And then it just kind of spread throughout everyone who uses the hashtag the fandom menace. It's kind of our thing. So when somebody comes on, we just go
Nice.
hail. And I'm sure it triggers a few people too. That's exactly why we
That's
say
always
it.
an extra good
So,
reason.
hail everyone in the chat.
Yeah.
So for the people who are not familiar with Nerdrotic, though, and are not familiar with you, because I know there are a few, where we left off, where we started when we tried this the first time, was I wanted just to give people an introduction to who you are, like what is your story, and what's Nerdrotic? How did you start this? How did you come to start this podcast?
Oh my God. Do you have, how long do we have?
All day.
I'll try to do the very short Cliff Notes version. I love that. Yeah, I'm a CEO. So what, Blake St. Clair? I'm looking at the chat. It's great. Okay. So, my life. I'm just a blue collar guy. So I'm sober. I'm a sober dad. I've got kids. I'm not going to go into the past part of my life. I used to work in auto parts. And one day when I was working in Oakland Acura, I saw a little ad in the paper said, "Hey, you want to buy a comic collection?" And I'm like, "Yeah," because I always wanted to buy a comic store in retirement, right? So I went, checked out this guy. Yes, they used to put ads in the paper. And I met this guy, and he's in our chats to this day, which is pretty funny. That when I was buying the collection, it was from another store, and he's all, "Hey, if you're interested in buying a store, the store you shop at is for sale." I'm all, "Okay, well, why not?" So I asked the shop owner, how much for the shop. We agreed on a deal, and within a week, I quit my job, which I liked. I liked the job, and I read a book, Small Business for Dummies, and I was a comic shop owner. And I did that for 10 years in San Francisco, and it was crazy, and it was fun, and it was everything I wanted to do, and I was immersed in the one thing I loved, and I got to talk to nerds. I'm a lifelong nerd. I learned to read from comic books. My life was changed by Star Wars. I know there's people out there who probably still haven't seen it, but it was more than just a movie to me. It was it was a start of a movement, really. I was watching Star Trek for as long as I could remember, the 66 Batman series, the 50s Superman series. So that just kind of set me on my path of being a lifelong nerd. It sucked being a nerd when you were in elementary school and junior high because you got a lot of crap. It's not like now. And to work professionally in it was great. Got to travel, got to meet a lot of people. But then it affected my sobriety in a very harsh way. and all the accolades, all the fun meetings, which was very important to me because, I had been sober before. I had a horrible drug addiction in my teenage years, got out of it, got married, divorced, and then that's what led me up to the comic store. And it all started going to my head, and it made me fall off the wagon, which forced me to sell the comic store. I didn't want to. I was going to shut it down, and somebody came in and offered to buy it. And I said, sure, at least it's still there for the customers. And I had to rebuild my life again. So at that point, I went from, in 2009, I had the Best of the Bay. My shop was voted Best of the Bay by the customers. It was on top of the world. 3 years later, after the recession hit, I was, kind of at rock bottom. My marriage was pretty damn close to over. Wasn't going to see my kids for a long, long time. So I decided to clean up. I went to a sober living environment. And while I was at this sober living environment, I started a podcast just for something fun to do. I just needed something to do that wasn't thinking about rebuilding my life, and just so I could forget about it for a couple of hours. So me and a friend of mine recorded a podcast in a Starbucks at West Portal in San Francisco. And that was our first podcast, and it sounded terrible. A guy bought us a coffee, and we talked about Green Arrow for about an hour. And I had no idea what that was going to start. Now, I had podcasted before at the comic store a little bit, just playing around with it. But I liked it so much. We started doing it like once a month, right? While I was going to meetings and trying to find new work. And I ended up, going back into the blue collar work of auto parts and stuff. And then, but I kept doing this podcast because it was fun. Nobody was listening. It was on iTunes, and I had a website. The Nerdrotic.com was born in 2014. And maybe my sister was listening at the time, and my co-host friends were. But we kept doing it because it was fun. We had no idea if anybody was listening for 3 years probably. But we just did it, once that turned into twice a month, and it turned into once a week.
Because you loved it.
I loved it. It was so much fun. And I could talk about nerd stuff all day, all night, never shut up about it. We started doing a regular Friday night show. I named it Friday Night Tights again when it started. It was I started backing stuff up on YouTube, but I never thought much of it for about 2 years. And then I started reviewing television shows. I started with Westworld and Ash versus Evil Dead, and Game of Thrones. And we would just go live after the show aired. We'd get like 5 or 6 people in our live stream. And for a while, we didn't even know that there was a chat. I didn't know there was a chat. Somebody had to email me and go, there's people actually watching you. And I'm like, what? What's that?
We just had someone yesterday tell one of my friends was like, hey, I became a member on your YouTube page. And I'm like, what's that?
Yep. All kinds of things happen, and we just find out through our listeners. And so once we figured out we had a chat, we had a good community of people, of 5 or 6 people who would come and watch our reviews, and they're really nice. And I rode the fence. I started seeing problems in comic books and in television probably around 2007 in the comic books, not in television, but in comic books. I started seeing stuff that was annoying me. So it wasn't like outright, but SJW stuff, it started creeping in.
Was that sort of your first introduction? I know we talked about this on your show on Friday Night Tights, but was that your first introduction to wokeness? Was seeing it change comics?
I wouldn't say it didn't blow my mind at that point. It didn't, I just started annoying me. It was being an annoyance. My awakening was later, about a year later.
Mm-hmm.
But at the comic store, it was just annoying stuff. But I saw the crowd that would eventually come in and infiltrate comics. I saw them there, and I never thought for a million years that they would take over comics. So I didn't feel threatened by them or anything. I just knew they were there, and it's there was a comic show called the Alternative Press Expo. It's called Ape. They held it every year in San Francisco. It was owned by the people who do Comic-Con, and it's all of those people, and they hate superhero comics, and they hate anything traditional, but they were fine in their own little space right there. They were harmless. So I would go to this, and I would cavort with them because, like, I'm not a right-left guy. I'm not a political guy. I'm pretty much always been a centrist or just independent. I do my own thing. So it never bothered me much, but it started getting into mainstream comics more and more and more. And by 2013, when I sold my shop, if I didn't, I had a lot of personal stuff going on, but it started getting pretty bad. So when I started the podcast, I was just doing the TV stuff. And then I was, it's been a couple of years and I'm like, all right, I'm going to start moving towards owning a comic shop again. I had a 5-year non-compete in San Francisco, so I couldn't open one in the city of San Francisco, but I'm like, I've got 3 years to work on this. So I'm going to work on it. And I went to YouTube and I'm like, and after I sold the comic shop, I had stopped reading comics for a year. Right. So I kept reading them for a little while.
Why was that? Was it?
I needed to focus on my life. And it was when I was reading comics, it was honestly, it was too hard. It was reminding me of the shop. It's like a horrible breakup when you sell a business. It's like losing a family member. So it was just too difficult. So I'm like, I don't need anything difficult because I'm sober again and I need to focus on that. So I'm going to stop reading comics for a year. I'll just come back in a year. It's no big deal. It's like a soap opera. You'll pick up and you won't miss anything. Somebody will die. Somebody get resurrected. It just always happens that way. So I'm going to I need a refresher. I went to YouTube and I searched for, some channels to kind of get updated on comics. And I found this guy, Diversity in Comics, and Jeff from World Class Bullshitters. They both had put out videos. Diversity in Comics was Captain Marvel is everything wrong with Marvel. And Jeff's at World Class Bullshitters was Marvel is literally begging you to buy their comics. And I had, I took a year off and I come back and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? And I went down that rabbit hole and I saw the birth of SJW Marvel. I'm like, oh, no. And, I didn't want to get involved at first because professionally I knew some of these people. So I still wanted to keep my professional contacts. As time went on, that mattered a lot less to me. I'm
very familiar with this.
Yes.
This path.
When you see your professional contacts treating customers like crap, people I talk to every day, and seeing them treat them like crap on Twitter, I just felt I didn't feel the need to stay in contact with these people anymore. I was just like, I don't know what's happened to my industry. And this was years ago. It's fallen apart now, and we all saw it coming. So I just continued, working on my job and doing the podcast thing. I started reviewing more TV, and then, I cover Star Trek, got a little boost from the channel. It got me up to about 1,000 subs. And that was right at the end of, I believe, 2017. I hit 1,000 subs. And then towards the end of 2018, I started covering more shows, The Expanse. I get a little boost. And then I, started covering Doctor Who. Doctor Who changed gender from a male to a female. And I'm a huge fan of the show. And at the time, I'm like, I'm just not going to watch it anymore. I'm done. And one of my mods had talked me into covering the show. So I covered the show. And I gave it a chance. I tried to give it a chance, and it was garbage from the start. And I just said it. I'm like, this is terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. The only reason they did this was just to change the gender. It's just all SJW. It's all filled with agenda, intersectional feminism. I was getting killed on these things, and I didn't know how to react to that. So the best reaction was not to care. I don't care. Because the channel was fun, and I'm like, if it goes down in flames, great. But it just blew up after that.
Because you were speaking truth.
Yes. Yes.
And not caring. I truly believe that's a kind of a secret formula that people don't understand is you can't have I think it's hard to be successful at something when your priorities are out of whack. And I mean, not that people can't do it, but a lot of times, you know, when you look at someone who breaks through like your show has, or people want to know, you know, how did they get there? How did that break through? I remember in podcasting when I was working in comedy, one of the first ones that really started to gain a following and to make a lot of money was Mark Maron, comedian. He started doing WTF with Mark Maron. And then a lot of the comedians I was working with, some of them would say things like, you know, I need to make money. I need to get my name out there. I'm going to start a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know if you're going to make money immediately and get your name out there. You start the podcast because you love it. And you say what you want, you say what you truly believe because you love it and not because you can't be I don't know, let me just ask you, if you had been afraid to speak your true opinions about Doctor Who, do you think your show would be where it's at right now?
No, absolutely not. I think that's the biggest problem with commentary and reviews right now is people can tell when you're holding back and you're the audience is incredibly smart. One of the biggest problems with some especially the access media outlets is they believe the audience is a bunch of idiots. And it's to the contrary. They can sniff out BS quicker than I can. And and when you treat them they can sense it when you treat them that way. And the reason there was such a huge boom on YouTube was because it was of a massive hole vacuum left by media who were closing down comment sections, calling people Yahtzees, phobes, all that stuff was going on, and they had nowhere to go. So we went to each other because, you know, I'm just a fan. A lot of the access media, they like to call themselves journalists when they just copy and paste other people's articles and maybe add a little flair to it. You're not a journalist, by the way. Yeah. So I think if you're reviewing television and you're commenting on news, you need to be honest and not worry about pissing off a movie star or a company. That's the last thing I'm worried about. I don't ever want to work in Hollywood. I don't ever want to work with people in Hollywood. I don't ever want to work for a corporation in Hollywood. I am fine where I am right now. I don't need to do anything more than this. And if the money stops, I'm still going to do it. I don't care because it's fun. I'll just get a job. You know, I'm not going to stop doing this. And I think that's the most important part. If you're a YouTube channel and you're like, you know, Star Wars Theory out there, he does lore videos. I mean, then fine. I get it. You don't want to get involved in the cultural fight. But if you're commenting on anything these days, you're in it, whether you like it or not. And people come to get your opinion, whatever side you're on. And that side's my side, by the way. And, you know, I also watched other YouTubers and learned from them instead of you see so much jealous and envy out there. There's so much inspiration out there. There's so many great YouTubers you can learn from. It doesn't matter if they have 5 subs or 1 million. I get inspired by channels. I watch live streams with 15 people in them. They're really entertaining. There's a lot of fun people in our sphere. We have a little corner on the internet, and it's tiny. You know, nobody has 1 million subs. Well, the quartering does now, but nobody has 1 million subs, and we're always talking to each other, and it's not. We most definitely do not agree on everything, but ultimately we agree on respecting the fan, and you know what, and respecting what came before, and we see the cultural vandalism that has been going on with. And that's a term, you know, I learned from the great Dave Cullen. And I've been inspired by Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, like Jeff at World Class Bullshitters, Ethan Van Sciver, all these channels out there that have paved the way. Richard Meyer at Diversity in Comics, who went through the ringer because he criticized some comic books and was called the worst things in the world, painted to be, you know, a Yahtzee. I call them Yahtzees. It's YouTube speak, but you know what I mean. And I was there in the chats when all of this went down, and it's been an evolution, and it hasn't stopped. People kind of just thought it would be this thing that went away. No, it's been reinvigorated now over the last couple of weeks, and it's because of this cultural vandalism. And we have been painted. People in my chats, people in my comment section, people who have been on my live streams. I'm sure you have dealt with plenty of this. that you are painted because you have a difference of opinion. You are a Yahtzee, you are an ist or a phobe, and you should just be shut down and nobody should, even listen. And I've had people from Hollywood reach out and say, I can't say anything, but I like what you're doing because we need the discourse. We need to have this discourse or we go to a very bad place. And well, look where we are, because they were shutting down discourse everywhere. And I was hoping to shut it down in entertainment when it's just really light discussion. And hopefully this didn't bleed into the real stuff, but unfortunately it did. And here we are. You're seeing people, what they would do is they would some people who use the hashtag the Phantom Menace can be jerks. They go out there, they attack people. I don't condone that. I don't at movie stars. I don't at companies. I'm not down with that. Speak your mind all day long, but try to keep it to the big boys at least, and not just regular fans. If a fan likes something, leave them alone. That's kind of my attitude. But they conflate us with the worst of us, and that's what happens. And then we all get put into this group. It ends up being counterintuitive, and then we get labeled and then dismissed. And it's very easy to do if you just repeat the lie over and over again. If any of us talk, anytime somebody talks to one of us, there is somebody on Twitter saying you are talking to somebody on the alt-right or some garbage like that.
They call us that too. And they don't care about, the fact that Carter is an anarcho-capitalist. And
no one cares about
I'm
that.
I'm a liberal. No, it doesn't matter. You all get called alt-right is what we found.
Can I ask you a question, Gary?
Yeah.
Do you think that, part of it is they've set up this culture of intimidation, right? It's not just vandalism, but there's also a gangster mentality where there's legitimate reasons to be afraid of your peer group and people around you and how they'll react, because there has, the radical, I'll call them the radical left or whatever, the woke crowd, the social justice crowd, has set up this sort of just cultural intimidation to fall in line. Do you think there's a reason why they, you said you were hoping it wouldn't metastasize out of the arts. Do you think there's a reason why it started in the arts in the first place, and maybe that actually is inevitable?
Oh, yes. I saw it on somebody tweeted at me, and I saw it on their header. And there's some Portland school that has this at their school. It's, if you want, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you want to change a society, change what's popular in their culture first. And that's exactly that's how we are all addicted to pop culture, sports, mainstream media, but it's all entertainment. It really is, and all scripted. And if you get to that first, it's very easy to get to people. And that's exactly what they've done. They've infiltrated every aspect of it. And, I can't say if it's coordinated by some mastermind, with the puppet strings probably, but, or it's just a bunch of like-minded people who, got in there and got rid of all the dissenting voices, or any dissenting voices that are still there, like you said, are too afraid to speak up. And that's been the problem. The people who have been too afraid to speak up, that's what perpetuated this. And now we have people who do speak up, and we're trying to, I try to recruit more and more people every day. I know, like YouTube, people want to say it's crap right now, and whatever, that's fine. Still get on it, because that's exactly what they did. They went into Marvel Comics, for example, and they hate everything about superheroes, but they got in there to change it, and they did. So why can't we do the same?
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to play by the rules before you want to change them. And some of these rules suck, and you got to work around them and be smart. But I think the only way you stay effective is by staying here, and hopefully, and then someday maybe another platform gets built by some, I don't know, based billionaire. I don't know if there is one, but that's what it's going to take. And then in the meantime, we still got to do this. And first and foremost, I'm having fun. I'm like having so much fun doing this. It's not like this grind or anything. I love doing it, and I think it's fun. And even when we have like days like today, but No, I think this is the best place to be for it right now. So if more people want to start a channel for fun, for a hobby, it's not going to pay you right away and it might not take off. Go ahead and do it because we need more common sense out here. And we need to infiltrate these places with common sense.
Well,
Yeah.
fun in and of itself is
What is
fun is an offensive thing to be having in front of the social justice left.
Mm-hmm.
So even if all you do is demonstrate that it's possible to actually enjoy comics and science fiction for something other than the moral statements that they're trying to make or some sort of propagandist agenda, but you can just enjoy the stories and the heroes, that alone is subversive.
Yep,
that's exercising your privilege, guys. I was going to ask you, what is well, first I was going to ask you what's one of your favorite either television shows or comic book series that has been tainted by wokeness, but it sounds like it might be Doctor Who. And I'll let you answer that though. And then my second question is, what's something new that you appreciate that is not tainted or not tainted very much? Like what do we have currently that you're watching that you would recommend?
Doctor Who is by far the worst intellectual property that has been tainted by wokeness. There's Star Trek, there's Star Wars, Marvel Comics, DC Comics. They've all had their fair share. But as far as like just taking one character and flushing it down the toilet for wokeness, that's Doctor Who. And something that I enjoyed reading comic books, just in general, like any comic book. What they've done to Batman is criminal. It's criminal what they've done to Batman. And they had him stood up at a wedding and fawning for Catwoman and basically, cutting his balls off for lack of a better term. Yeah, it's terrible what they've done to Batman. This guy named Tom King. He used to be in the CIA and now he writes for comic books.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
No. But my question is there anything currently being put out in the mainstream that's not woke that you would suggest? Like I saw Az, who was on your show with me, Friday Night Tights, mentioned that he finally watched Cobra Kai. And I would say that's a show that I really enjoyed, and I don't think it's tainted very much by wokeness. Are there other properties out there right now that seem to be going against the cultural grain?
Not many. Cobra Kai is most definitely one of them. They'll even clown it at times. But it depends on who you talk to on that one, because I think people have been pounded over the head with wokeness for so long. They've lost their tolerance for even the slightest amount. And I get that. I really like The Expanse. It's a sci-fi show. Some people accuse it of being woke, and the writers of the books most certainly are. Don't follow them on Twitter. But as far as the show is concerned, they've kept that out of there. And it's a hardcore, cool, well-written sci-fi show. It's brilliant. So Cobra Kai and The Expanse are probably the best two things out there. If Seth MacFarlane's The Orville comes back, it's pretty fun. But some people don't like Seth too. But it's far and few between. It really is, even the Joker, which was universally loved by most people, it had his messaging in there. It just wasn't, it just depends on how it's presented. I'm fine with good writing if an idea is presented within a narrative, and that's it. I mean, it's just part of the story. But you can tell now when these things are being used as platforms. They've come out and said it, and we've suspected it for a long, long time. But the creator of Star Trek uses Star Trek as a platform now. They actually use the cast to influence the vote in Georgia. They used Star Trek.
What? I don't know about this.
Yeah, they took the cast down there to do some live stream to get the vote out in Georgia. And that's despicable. I think Star Trek is something that's just supposed to bring people together. It's not supposed to be used to influence a vote. Doctor Who now is made to create conversations, not just entertain people. And it used to be that's what these shows were. That you can I always talked about this in the comic shop. I'd have people on the left and hardcore people on the right just sitting there talking about comics. And if I'd sit there, I watched my father, my late father-in-law with my good friend who's a uber liberal. I'm like, if those two were talking about politics right now, they'd be screaming at each other. But they were sitting there talking about comic books they used to read and focusing on the stuff in common. We can't even get to this point right now.
That's interesting because I think the same things happen to sports.
Yep.
You know,
yeah.
It used to be this thing where you could come together. It's not about your different political opinions or policy positions. And it's become so tainted now with politics that people are not able to come together even to celebrate. You know, we have this team in common and people aren't going to games anymore. And it's almost like they're, I don't think there's some mastermind twiddling his mustache planning all this, but the way in which it operates is such that it is directly targeting and sort of taking out the things that bring us together, the things that give us amusement and the things that bring us together.
Yeah. Like Carter said, amusement right now is a tool of the patriarchy, and you should not have fun.
Well, it's your privilege.
You should be feeling guilty.
You should if you can have fun, that means you have some sort of privilege, and privilege is a word that's chosen to make it seem like you are. It's something above and beyond the norm. It's something extra from what should be expected. Where in fact, when in fact having fun should be considered the norm. If you're unable to have fun, you're disadvantaged. You're not privileged for having fun. You're normal for being able to have fun. But they've chosen that language precisely. I think one of the things, part of the culture war, I think, is to find the people you want to attack and deny them any enjoyment of life, because that's really demoralizing. I don't want to switch topics too much, but you brought this up earlier, and I'm curious about it because I really loved Star Wars as a kid. You said Star Wars changed your life. That's a statement and a half. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. Well, when I saw it, I mean, I was too young to really understand like how much, but when I saw, I remember it vividly. Just the opening moments of the movie and the crowd and what I was seeing, and it just spoke to me. I'm like, and there's probably millions of people out there who could say the same, but it spoke to me. It was like, this feels like home. That's what it felt like. I felt like such a weird, strange kid, and I see this place, and it just took me away, and I wanted to know everything about it and became obsessed about it. Read everything I could. I was stayed on top of the news, which it got me more curious. I'm like, how do I find out news about this thing I like? And I started going to the newsstands and asking the guys there, have you ever heard of this thing called Star Wars? Is there any magazines on it? Can I read more about it? But it really, and it was a place to go when I was having hard times. I mean, I don't want to get uber details here, but I had a pretty rough childhood, not from my parents. My parents they did the best they could, but I had a pretty rough childhood, and it was a place to go to escape too. I mean, that was a place where it was a coping mechanism, right? So was there too. So it was the escapism part, and plus I loved everything about science fiction. And it opened the door for me reading new books and reading new comics. And there was a time when I was 12, I could name everybody who worked on that movie. I just everybody in the credits, I knew their names like they were rock stars. That was the Beatles to me, and George Lucas was God. And Steven Spielberg, and then I got into Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was just the perfect age, being like 7 to 14 in the late 70s and early 80s for film was perfect. We had some of the best movies come out, and it was a revolutionary time. And that's when stuff was fun. Stuff was just fun.
So assuming that we share the premise that Star Trek has fallen apart, or Star Wars has fallen apart, is it because it's been infiltrated by people with an agenda, or is it just incompetence? Because it seems like it just kind of started to fall apart way before the woke stuff metastasized.
It's both. It was incompetent wokeness. Kathleen Kennedy, whose name has been associated with all those things we used to love. And I used to look at her with great respect and thought she was perfect for the job when I heard. Turns out that's not the case. Turns out she wasn't that great. She was attached to a lot of great people. And she just thought Star Wars could just print money. Didn't really matter how much you put into it. But it's really important that we change it fundamentally because it's too white. And then coming out and saying things like that and saying the Force is female instead of just doing that thing. What Disney should have done, and hindsight's 2020, but what they should have done is bought the property and thought about it for a couple of years. Sat there and just thought about it. Like, what should we do? But they rushed into everything. They had that deal with Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. But I mean, pure incompetence by not putting Luke Skywalker in the first film and not putting Han, Luke, and Leia together in the first film. That's the biggest mistake in cinematic history. It's the biggest gaffe ever. I mean, it's just ridiculously stupid not to do that. And they did it as clickbait, basically. Mm-hmm. They wanted to spread the characters out throughout, so to make sure you went to all three movies because, they had to know they had some turds on their hand because they didn't plan. And we know that because one of the stars of the film said they didn't have a plan.
I didn't realize the Force was gendered. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah,
it is. It is. No, it's changing every day now. Now you can control people are fighting for the control of the Force. That was from Star Wars just had a bunch of goodwill recently with the return of Luke Skywalker at the end of The Mandalorian or the CGI Luke. And they had to put minimal effort to finally give the fans what they wanted years ago. And there was an outcry. And I think that a lot of that was a lot of pent up emotion this year. There's a lot of factors that went into it. It was just a good moment. I didn't feel any emotion. My emotional connection to Star Wars has been severed. And remember, this is the thing that changed my life. And I loved it all my life. And now I just don't care about it anymore. That's what Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, Pablo Hidalgo, and the idiots over there did. But it was a good moment for a lot of people. And then yesterday they announced this new project, which is this cross-publishing thing called the High Republic. And it is just it's the snowflake and safe space of Star Wars. It's the wokest thing ever. And I put some stuff on Twitter, but we have our first Jedi hairdresser. It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I have a question. So when you're talking about what it was like with entertainment choices in the 80s and I too remember, Star Wars didn't change my life, but I do remember movies in particular being much more enjoyable back then without all this heavy ideology being rammed down our throats, and kind of nostalgic for that time. And this year during lockdowns, I've watched a lot of old 80s comedies. I'm enjoying getting out the old Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell and movies like that. What are your kids? How old are your kids?
They're old now. I got a 15-year-old and a 24-year-old.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe this question won't apply, but I was going to ask, what is there for kids to enjoy these days? It's not lecturing to them.
Not much. YouTube. I think that's what parents have to deal with is kids are on YouTube a lot, and gaming. The entertainment industry is getting, and okay, so gaming is soundly defeating Hollywood. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Hollywood collectively doesn't. It's a fraction of what gaming is doing right now.
Wow.
And they've lost that demographic, that key demographic of the 18 to 49 boys, and that's why one of the reasons Hollywood went so hard over the last 5 years into just trying to get more women into the movie theaters and more women reading comic books and stuff that used to be traditionally for boys, because they perceived the boys were leaving because they were just gaming. Now it's just a false perception. It was eroding, but your core audience was still boys, and what women were there anyway. They liked it anyway, especially with like Doctor Who. Doctor Who had a huge female audience.
I was a big Doctor Who fan.
Yep. They didn't need to do what they did, and they but this is when it was over the last 5 years when agenda became more important than making money. It's like, no, and that's what the whole platform thing and the whole Silicon Valley attitude of we're making the world a better place with a Doctor Who episode. It's like, get real. But they want to believe that their importance. And that's kind of what led to that. And gaming's at fault because gaming did attract that core audience and publishing and television, their demise is coming due to that because it's interactive. It's interactive entertainment. You cannot compete with that. And with how great some of the games are, some of them are duds. Some of them have problems. Gamers are gamers because they're that's a bunch of dudes. And, we talk to each other different than, and that's, what some people might consider abuse is actually a term of endearment. Usually it's what they would call locker room talk. That's just how guys talk to each other. And we have this new generation that can't handle any of that. I mean, we can go down the line why that's the case, but I think a lot of it we've been in a very comfortable country. There hasn't been a lot of strife until recently, and a lot of people took a lot of stuff for granted. But entertainment took a hard swing in the wrong direction. They read the tea leaves wrong. I don't know what, but the weirdest thing, what they are doing is they continue to do it. Like Doctor Who, clear failure, been a failure for 3 years now, but they're still going to make more of it. Star Trek has been a clear failure. You're not succeeding if your audience, if half your audience is pissed, you're not succeeding. That's not, you want to sell your thing to the most people possible. You don't want them fighting. You don't, sure, it creates clicks and a bunch of attention, but does it actually equate to selling things? No, it does not. And it ends up destroying it. And look at where we're at, with comic book industry is falling apart. And, genre will be not far behind. Star Trek, Doctor Who will not be far behind. That stuff's expensive, and they can't keep funneling money into stuff that's not successful, but they continue to do it. And that's the thing I don't have an answer for. I wish I did.
I think it's, we talked about this a little bit on your show, but I think it's hard for people to understand that a company that's not interested in profits, when they get to a point where the ideology has converged to such a degree that so many people in powerful positions are now beholden to the belief system, whether they're true believers or not, but they're speaking it and they're beholden to it, it becomes paramount. It's more important than anything else. And I think maybe, unfortunately, what's going to have to happen is it sounds like a lot of these properties are going to crash eventually. There's only so long that can keep putting out seasons of Doctor Who that nobody's watching.
But I'm not sure a lot of executives have an incentive to really care about that because they're paid well enough and they can drive the business into the ground and jump ship if they need to beforehand. And so there's not really I would say there's a moral hazard here because they don't suffer the consequences of destroying Star Trek, for example. They don't. You can be an executive in charge of making really bad decisions, and personally, it doesn't really matter if you run that franchise into the ground. To you, it doesn't affect your career. You just jump to the next thing or do whatever. And and I think this idea that corporations have always been just focused on money has just been false from the beginning. I mean, we talked to Michael Rechtenwald about this when Gillette was founded. They had a socialist agenda from the very, very beginning. So I think
these are things I didn't know. Yeah,
I can you fill us in on that? Because if you'll remember, Carter, I wasn't on that call.
Well, here's the thing. Socialism is basically, when you think about the socialist utopias, and let's just go the full communist route, right? There's central planning, and there's kind of someone in charge of, the government in charge of planning everything and running everything. Well, that looks an awful lot like one large corporation, doesn't it? And so if you look at how when Gillette was founded, they're very explicit. The guy wrote books about this. He believed that the path towards that kind of socialism was through ever expanding companies who would eventually kind of merge with the government, take over functions, and eventually become one giant corporation that runs everything, which kind of becomes a government. It's kind of the same thing. And the idea that I think one of the things that Hollywood has done a really bad job of is they've painted this trope of capitalists as money grubbers who care about nothing else. And there aren't many people like that in business. I spent 20 years in Silicon Valley with startups, starting my own companies. I've advised hundreds, if not thousands, of founders. Almost none of them only care about money. They all have some sort of agenda. A lot of them have what you're talking about, which is I'm going to make the world a better place with one episode of Doctor Who or whatever, ridiculous stuff, but they have some other motivating factor. And we're comfortable enough as a society that if you're mildly successful and you've got your bills paid and your kids can go to college and you can take vacations, the accumulated wealth after that really has diminishing value. And you might feel much better instead of amassing another 10 million bucks, it might just feel better to go woke and get some pats on the back from your woke friends and, get invited to the right cocktail parties in San Francisco. So there are other human desires other than just, I need to make as much money as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's like you said, Gary, then they get that, what they're getting out of it is that sense of moral and intellectual superiority over the fans. It's like, if only these dumb rube fans would listen to what we're trying to tell them.
Right.
We are importing that our moral, intelligent belief system, and these people are just too stupid to get it. That's why they're not watching.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yes. You hit the nail on the head. Yellow Flash, another great YouTuber out there, says this: "Are you good enough to be our audience?" That's their whole attitude. You little plebs. We are smart. They're going to come along eventually, and if they don't, we don't need them as customers anymore. And that's the attitude of the BBC.
That's the attitude of the Democratic Party lately.
They're finding out now that, oh crap, we need that money still. That's why you see Disney doing what they're doing. Whether there's factions or not, I don't know. There's factions in every corporation, to be honest with you. But I think Disney's overall goal is to amass as much power and money as possible. But right now they're in kind of survival mode. So maybe they have to, give the fans what they want for a little while, but I wouldn't get used to it. The only thing we can do is just continue to speak up about it. I get asked this every week. Why do you do what you do? Are you in a fight to win? I'm like, yes, I always intend on winning. It doesn't mean I expect to. I'm going to do it every day, and what happens, happens. I'm going to try to temper my expectations. But I just know, I've learned through life that when I sit back and wait for something to happen or wait for somebody to come in and swoop in and change something, I generally don't like it if it does happen. And most of the time it doesn't. I have found through my life, if I want something to change, I have to change it. I have to go out there and do what I can, and at least I tried. And I think a lot of us have spoken up, and I think we did get a giant well, we did. It's a fact. The Phantom Menace got noticed by Disney, and then they changed something. Whether that Luke Skywalker moment does not happen if people don't speak up. We would be well on our way to intersectional feminist whatever on Disney Plus. Trust me, they understand it. Look at the direction Marvel's going in right now. It's going hard into the woke, and it's gonna be ugly when that happens. And they're gonna get the same reaction that everybody else did. And Marvel went through this with the comics, and they're making the same mistake because they refuse to listen, because it's an ideology at this point. It's not even a business philosophy. Mm-hmm. It's an ideology that I can't be wrong. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Oh shit, we got to keep fighting it, and then vote with our wallet. And yeah, there is a time where you got to go, we tried. Like with Doctor Who, I cover it, but it's dead. It's not coming back. I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to bring it back and save Doctor Who. There's no saving Doctor Who. Right now, I'm just venting my anger because I'm pissed because something I loved all my life got just trashed. Damn, 60 years of canon destroyed in 2 years. In 2 years by some not a moron, but just by some provocateur, by a provocateur.
With a moronic belief system.
Yep.
So we have a couple of questions in chat. I'm gonna read these for you, and then I have a big question for you. Pirate Tomsky asks, Gary, if you could save one franchise this point forward, what would it be?
Oh, I'd be selfish. I'd save Doctor Who, but Star Wars is probably the one that can be saved.
You think Star Wars has a chance to be saved?
It like we're talking like 0.0000001% chance
non-zero.
to be saved. Yes,
non-zero.
So.
Can you just? I'm sorry to go on a tangent for a moment, but I'm not familiar with at all what's happened to Doctor Who, and I know your audience, I'm sure, is, but some of the people in chat and watching right now are not from your channel, and so they might be lost like I am. All I know from what I've heard is they switched it to a woman. Okay, that sounds, I guess bad if you know the Doctor Who character, but what specifically did they do to ruin the show?
Changing it into a woman when it's a male character and it doesn't work. And then when you do that, they don't bother writing her like a woman. She's not feminine. She's not a male or female. She's a pod person who comes out of the TARDIS with her mouth open. Yeah, she's just a terrible actress. There was no effort put into it, and I have been against it from the start, and I will remain against it. And I've been called sexist from the get-go. I was like, okay, fine, I'm sexist because I want one fictional character to stay a dude, to stay a bloke. And you know what? This bloke doesn't have to be white. He could be black, Asian, Filipino. I don't care what he changes into as long as he's a bloke, because that's the beauty of the show is there's so much change around it. And this show introduced a pansexual character a decade ago that everybody loves. It's just never been a problem. The show was co-created by a woman. The theme was reworked by a woman in the 60s. So it's been ahead of everything forever. It never needed to do this. And it was just to take something away so a bunch of people can go, I'm drinking fanboy tears. If you're the kind of person that needs that in your life, how empty is that? How empty is that? That is horrible.
Can you explain why? Because I think you and I agreed that I'm trying to remember who it was on your show that agreed. I think it was you that Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, when they made Starbuck a woman, that actually worked. And I agree. I liked Starbuck. I liked that character of Starbuck. Do you share that opinion? And if so, what's different about these two properties? Why was one done well and the other is done poorly?
Absolutely. Az brought that up in our live stream, Heel versus Babyface, my good friend. He's on Friday Night Tights. And thanks again, Keri, for coming on the show. And we put you through the ringer for a couple.
Hey, I got
Friday
to experience that locker room talk you talk about.
It's awesome.
Actually,
right?
That's one of the things about your Friday Night Tights show. I'll get back to the question, but I really like the fact that it's just a bunch of dudes hanging out and talking without fear and giving each other crap once in a while and disagreeing and just having this. It just feels like you're hanging out with friends. And I really enjoyed watching and then going back and binging some of your old episodes, because it's like, oh, you can put that on while you're making dinner and just laugh and listen to people cracking each other up. And it reminded me of I used to be in a gun club, a gun school in LA, and that was my first time trying to get used to the way that guys will insult each other out of love. And like you said, they'll pick on each other, but it's because they love you. If they weren't picking on you, they don't like you. And I was trying to get better at it myself, and I bought a little book called Insults and Comebacks. So I could fit in. So I feel like I prepared myself for your show.
Oh, yeah, you're great. No, you're one of us, Keri. And I say that with all respect. But no, it worked for Battlestar. It worked for Battlestar Galactica. I mean, for one, it was an alternate universe. That does count. So they weren't remaking the original or taking anything from the original. They said, this is a separate universe. This is a reimagining, and we're going to do something different. I wasn't crazy about the decision at first. As a matter of fact, I hated it. And I was at the Comic-Con where Edward James Olmos came out and said, if you were a fan of the old Battlestar Galactica, he opened the freaking con. And people were like, what? But then I watched it, and it was brilliant. And Katie Sackhoff earned it, because Starbuck was a flawed character. She was a hot mess in that show, and they didn't use her to they didn't prop her up by degrading the men in the show Trek. They purposely put men in situations to make them look like idiots, to prop up their hollow wooden characters because they have no talent. Ronald D. Moore, who wrote Battlestar Galactica, is one of the most talented writers in Hollywood. He wrote for Star Trek before. He wanted to do this idea with Star Trek. They wouldn't let him, so he did it with Battlestar Galactica, and history was made. Not everybody was happy with the end of that show. I liked it, but I understand. But the reason it worked because A, alternate universe, and B, Katie Sackhoff was a brilliant actress that she's just endearing and people like her. And she's great in interviews. She doesn't go out there and pop off and say anything stupid or insult fans. And that's why she's a fan favorite right now. And that's all it takes.
Great on Longmire. I don't know if you've seen Longmire, but
yes,
I like her on that too.
And like what Gina Carano's doing right now. What Gina Carano's doing is she's done more for fandom than anybody I can think of in the last 10 years. And it was real simple. It was like, I'm going to just talk to everyone and I'm not going to take any crap. And I'm just going to try to treat everyone with respect. And she does it with a little, nod and a wink. And she has been the toughest person I've seen in Hollywood. There's been campaigns by the media, by blue check marks on Twitter to cancel her on a regular basis. We had one woman from Sci-Fi, Sci-Fi Girl. It's Sci-Fi, but I call it Sci-Fi. Sci-Fi Girls. It's from the Sci-Fi Network. They had she had her own little blog or whatever. She went through Gina Carano's tweets. She got up one morning and goes, I'm going to see who Gina Carano liked. Apparently, this woman's a mother, too. So I don't know what maybe she had a nanny there.
Wow.
Looking through Gina Carano's to try to get her canceled. And she saw that she wished one of my friends happy birthday. And she follows some other people who are on the right. So what? But she's never gone out and said anything phobic, gone after anybody. But she's accused of that stuff all the time. And she just handles it. And that's great to see. If more people did that from Hollywood, showed a little spine, cancel culture wouldn't be this thing today. But it's the people who are, and it's easy to say, but it's the people who are silent and people who are in a position to do something and could stop this and don't, that perpetuate it. So I think it's great to have these the heretics in the world who are out there. The
heretics.
Yeah, we need the heretics.
You know who you guys should talk to if you haven't already? Have you talked to Mark Pellegrino? Have you had him on the show? He played Jacob on Lost. And
he's Lucifer on Supernatural. Is the one you're thinking.
Oh, yeah, on Supernatural. So we talked to him recently, and I'm not as familiar with Gina Carrero. I've heard you guys talk about her a little bit, but Mark Pellegrino, I had no idea. He's super not woke and unafraid, just very unapologetic and principled and brilliant and a thinking person in Hollywood who's not afraid to go against the grain and definitely has a spine. I would love to see him on your show. So I'm just putting a little suggestion out there. I have a question about you. Yeah, I have a question about you. So this is maybe a big question, maybe not, but you, in telling your story, your paths to where you are today, I'm wondering if you have done any reflection. Is there what is it about you that made you able to see wokeness for what it is? We've interviewed a lot of people about this, and sometimes it's because they have a family member who came from communism, or sometimes it's because they weren't able to see it for what it was at first, and they were in the woke cult like I was, and they had an awakening. But other times, I don't know, is there a personality characteristic? Is there something about your past or your path in this world that when you look at this stuff, you don't buy the lie that they're telling you that this is all about equality?
I haven't had anybody. I've always been pretty comfortable in both circles, but it wasn't like SJWs, like the liberals I still hang out with. They're very normal people. They're just like, they're liberal, but they don't want to burn the system down. They're very happy with America. I think probably my my lack of upbringing. So, I spent my very young years. I had a very, very troubled teenage life, adolescence. I was a little raging drug addict, punk rocker. So I was kicked out of my house at a very early age. So I brought myself up, not in the best way either in my formative years, and I ran with some very bad people and bad circles and got in a lot of trouble and survived a lot. And I think it was just my survival skills that helped me see through some bullshit sometimes. It doesn't always work. But like when you're out there, like on the street, when you're locked up and stuff, a lot of people are duplicitous. They want to screw you over, and you have to have your guard up all the time. And then, that can create another problem too. So it's with recovery, working my way through trust issues, but still being able to see through bullshit. Maybe that's it. But I can kind of recognize bullshit from the start sometimes, not all the time. I let my guard down and I can get jacked like any other person, but that's the way I see it. And probably because I've had to work for and because and gratitude, part of that too is I was on the street, had to work for everything I had, and I could not have done that anywhere else. That's why I'm grateful for where I am. So when I see people wanting to tear that down, just anytime I hear that I don't want to say they're my enemy. I hate to feel that way about it, but there's somebody who wants to take something away. Like, this place provides so much opportunity. It's not perfect at all, but it provides so much opportunity to where a loser like me could get a second, third, fourth, fifth chance. And, I was on the street, and now I have a family. I own a house. These are things I didn't think I was going to live to 30. Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to die very young, and I was on that course, and I didn't. So I am very appreciative of this place, as imperfect as it is. And what I see in this country, one of its biggest problems is a lack of gratitude, a lot of entitlement from a lot of people. And when I see that entitlement, and I see it from people who, and you want to be empathetic, but there's a point where that stops, and you got to stop blaming everybody else for your problems, and you got to go out and freaking work for it. And there's going to be no system that's going to give you everything. And what they're trying to do right now is tear down the one system that you could succeed in if you gave yourself half a chance. But it's very hard when you see the woke provocateurs coming in. And that's a long answer, but I can suss out bullshit because I've seen a lot of bullshit, and I've been a bullshitter for a long. When you're slinging drugs, you bullshit a lot. So that's how I can see it sometimes.
I mean, it kind of relates to what you were saying earlier, which is that we have kind of this cushy lifestyle. Our standard of living is so high as a culture. And one thing I've noticed is that most of these woke leaders, or the people stirring up most of the trouble, seem to actually live pretty cushy lives. Mom and dad sent them to school so that they could get a degree in sociology, and now they have a job at Twitter where they're playing around banning people, and like their life actually, it's pretty freaking easy. And they don't really have a connection to reality. That, look, for most people, life is a lot harder than it is for you. And it almost seems like there's this ideology is a byproduct, or at least something necessary to hold this ideology and to really push it, is this kind of detachment from reality. And it's a luxury belief system. It's like you can afford to believe ridiculousness because at the end of the day, you've got a roof over your head and you're pretty well off.
Yeah,
there's no question.
They're LARPing at life. They're LARPing at life.
I love
that. They have no connection. They have no gratitude because they have never earned anything. They have it's the entitlement again. So losing everything is no big deal because I didn't have to work for it. And I'm fine with burning everything down because I'm unhappy. And if I'm unhappy, everybody's got to be unhappy. And I mean, it's a huge problem in this country right now. And it's because, parents, there's a lot, the latchkey kids, we can go down the line. Now, I know there's plenty of people in the chat out there. You've all worked. You all appreciate what you have, and that's why we gravitate towards each other. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there who are ungrateful for what they think. Everything about this country is bad, and I'm not saying everything. I've never said everything about this country is great. It's been built like any other country on a lot of blood, a lot of bone, and that's how countries are built. But it doesn't mean you tear everything down and just put another layer of blood and bone down there. Which isn't going to solve anything for anybody out there who wants to burn all this shit down. It won't get better in your lifetime or your kid's lifetime or your grandkids' lifetime. So if you're cool with that, okay. But right now we have a template that works. And even though there's something crazy going on today, looked outside my house, people still going to work, even during the insane freaking lockdown here in California. People still are trying to make it. And what's threatening that right now, unfortunately, is our amusements. Our amusements have caused a lot of these problems and have caused a lot of, like you said, Carter, detach, absolutely detach. So there's no consequences to them whatsoever. And what they're doing is breaking the fabric of this country right now. And this is going to have long-term effects that are going to last for decades if we don't really stop this now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how. I honestly don't have an answer for it.
It also occurs to me that the amusements that this belief system has gone after and destroyed are the amusements, like we mentioned before, that it brought us together, that are not destructive, but amusements like alcohol and drugs, fine. They're perfectly happy with us spending our time and money on alcohol. I'm during the lockdowns here in Texas, I'm not sure. I know it's been crazier there in California, but in Texas, things were locked down to a certain degree, then opened back up. Then it was like, well, bars are going to be locked down, and no, we've got to keep the liquor stores and bars open. And there's this concession that's made for that kind of bread and circuses, because I think it's destructive. They shut down the gyms, but they'll leave the liquor stores open.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can I just I want to interject. You I know this is kind of a direction change, but you mentioned again earlier about gaming being where people are flocking to, and I'm kind of tangential to both the science fiction and the gaming world. Like, I've enjoyed some gaming, I've enjoyed some sci-fi, but I'm not deep in either world. And all I hear about gaming is things like Gamergate, which I guess is gaming literature more than games themselves. Have games been infiltrated? Are games now all woke, or are games still normal, I guess?
No, they've gotten infiltrated, and it depends on the game. Really, it depends on the company. But The Last of Us Part 2 was probably the wokest thing to come out. And gamers, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There might be one worse, but that's the one I noticed. I am not an avid gamer, but as somebody who sold comics, I understood that everybody who bought a comic book played a game. They all played games, and yeah, Last of Us Part 2 was the worst. What they did was they had a good first game that was universally loved, and the creator of that game decided to use it. I don't know if he had just one talk or two talks with Anita Sarkeesian, and all of a sudden the game is the wokest thing on the planet. They killed the male main character with a golf club in the beginning of the white male character with a golf club, and the one who kills him is this very muscular woman named Abby, and the rest is history if you don't know about it. But it's been infiltrated. It's not every single game. But there was a whole Gamergate thing that went on that it started as one thing, turned into another. But it started out with collusion with the access media and gaming, the gaming media, and it turned into a political movement, and it created people like Milo Yiannopoulos and others, and I mean Sargon of Akkad, I guess, and many others. And that was a whole thing that kind of led into what we're talking about now. But yeah, it's still there. I think gaming is still somewhat sane, but it's more of like, it's more sinister. It's its connection to China. All these companies' connection to China and Tencent media changing things. You're seeing woke, and you're also seeing free speech being stifled. You're seeing games being removed that are critical of the big country over there, and that's another problem that's going on with gaming and everything else in entertainment too.
Fair.
So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And like, there's little pockets of coolness, here and there. But I mean, the one thing I constantly hear in my chats is like, we just need to do our own thing now. We're kind of done.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been talking to a friend who's not in entertainment, who's more in the political sphere, who is saying, and I think this is maybe in the consciousness now, because I've heard it from more than one person, what you're just saying, which is to make our own things. And he sort of was saying to me, I think that what's going to happen is we're going to see a parallel economy develop, because these companies have made it clear, a lot of companies have made it clear, they don't care about half of the population or more. They don't care. They're not interested in marketing to them. It's that holier than thou attitude of, we are morally and intellectually superior, and we don't want you as our customer base. Are you smart enough to be part of our customer base? And so that creates a large vacuum and a huge opportunity for a parallel economy to develop. That, unfortunately, I think we're going to see, if my friend is right, these sort of politically aligned. I think it's going to align along this stupid right-left dichotomy, where they're going to be like, I'm a left company, I'm a right company, But I had one thing I wanted to read out, your opinion on it, and then I don't want to keep you too long. But Schmandoff, thank you, Schmandoff, who's been doing a lot of super chats, and I'm sorry we haven't been reading all of them. Schmandoff says that many Japanese companies are actually against wokeness, and that animators desperately need a union. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm not a big union guy, but I guess they get pretty screwed over in Japan. They do. But I don't know that much about it. And Japan is the last bastion of good storytelling and anti-wokeness through manga and anime, which, I mean, I have a working knowledge of both. I'm not nowhere near an expert. There are much better people who can make suggestions. But as far as the stories are concerned, there's a reason that manga is just outselling American comic books. It's a joke. They're selling millions and millions and millions of copies, and an American comic book, if it sells 40,000, it's a hit.
Wow.
So yeah, so Japan is a holdout, and yeah, there's still good things out there until Hollywood gets a hold of it, or big tech, or even worse, China, and then it becomes at least with Chinese entertainment, when they're not like, it's not propaganda, it's just, it's limited. There's certain stories you can't tell. You can't tell ghost stories and stuff. It's really bizarre. But it's cultural, I guess. And that's part of their thing. But the stuff I love, I like scripted entertainment. I like comic books. These are things I've loved my entire life. Novels, fantasy novels, my favorite. Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. That's the stuff. That's next, by the way. That's the one that's the big prize the SJWs want so bad, is they want
Lord of the Rings.
Yes, Lord of the Rings. They want to take Tolkien, the devout Catholic, who created a mythology for England, and they want to just destroy that. And I think it's about to happen with the big, expensive Amazon show, which will be a spectacular failure if they do that, because it's the most expensive show of all time. But yeah, but as far as the independent stuff, I think we are doing it. And you're right, that separate economy is happening already. So one of the things that gets brought to me and many others who do what I do on YouTube is like, well, you guys are just talking about it. What are you doing to offer a alternative form of entertainment? And my answer is, I'm doing it. This is my alternative form of entertainment. So instead of going and hearing Jimmy Kimmel regurgitate a joke from Stephen Colbert, I'm not saying I'm on their level and I don't want to be on their level, but you're coming to one of us to watch a live stream, or that's what I'm doing as well. I'm going to your guys' channel and I'm watching a live stream. It's the first thing I do every morning. I haven't watched mainstream news in years. I didn't watch it today, even with the thing to go. I went to YouTube. I went and found a YouTuber talking about this stuff. And that's what I do. That's my entertainment now. And I cover some, and there's some shows I like, but the vast majority of my time is watching YouTube videos and live streams.
Yeah. That's also why they've come down so hard on YouTubers in the past few years. I think is it's not even well. Part of it is because they're cracking down on anything that's not ideologically SJW. But another big part of it that Carter, I think you pointed out to me, is simply related to the fact that it's a threat in terms of eyeballs, in terms of what people are watching.
Yeah.
That legacy media has this hard on for independent media for YouTubers, and because they've developed such a large audience. I mean, look at
YouTube betrayed their customer base when they decided, because YouTube was the place for alternate media, obviously. Like, that was the place. If there was going to be real competition to corporate media, it was going to come on YouTube. And what YouTube decided to do was, and Facebook did a similar thing, partner with dying dinosaur legacy media and elevate their content and legitimize their content and suppress competition. And so YouTube actually, I think, betrayed its audience in a major, major, major way when it did that, because it was the alternate and it sold itself out to the exact enemy that was being fought. And so now YouTube and CNN have aligned agendas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even find stuff now. That a few years ago, if you were looking for, oh gosh, what was some of the funny Trump memes? I'm blanking on the name, but there was this funny Trump meme that was going around that everyone knew the name of it. I was looking for it, and it went from being the kind of thing that would show up number one in the search to, after one of their algorithm switches, after they said we're going to be promoting and prioritizing quote unquote authoritative content, you'd have to go to like the 10th page of results to find what you're actually looking for. Now it's just like a whole score of, do you mean this clip from CNN? Do you mean this from MSNBC? Do you mean this? Even if you have the exact name of the video. And yeah, that to me convinced me. It was like, oh, this is more about just propping up legacy media. It's not necessarily, it is ideological as well, but part of it's just, reviving this dinosaur.
By the way, I think strategically YouTube is doing it because they do want to kill legacy media eventually. But what they're doing is forcing legacy media to rely on them and bring them into their house, and then they can kill them and take over, which is what they'll do if they're smart. That's what they're trying to do. And CNN and NBC and Fox, they're all too stupid to recognize any of this. So they're striking deals with YouTube to do this. They're all like, yeah, we're suppressing Sargon of Akkad so that Fox News can air instead. And they're just looking at the short-term benefits. But in the long term, YouTube just plans to eradicate them.
Yep. And they'll be able to control all of it. And, in the meantime, most of us stay here because they change a rule. So we change how we talk. And there will be eventually a YouTube speak someday. And then they they take care of a couple of sacrificial lambs. My good friend, Josiah Rises, got demonetized, and he is a good kid. He just is, he's on the right. He speaks his mind, but he doesn't cuss. So he's a good Christian boy. He got demonetized because he brought up some stuff that they didn't want brought up. There's others that have been just completely deleted. And what they do is they pluck off a couple of channels to shut everybody up for a little while, and it works. It works. And then we have to readjust how we speak, but we have to figure out a way to stay here as long as we can, because that's how we infiltrate. And then, if we can get more of us, and if we're the majority, then it becomes very hard to get rid of us. Of course, for selfish reasons, I don't want to get, and I just talk about pop culture, but I got, put on that, I won't even mention the site, but there was a site that was labeling channels.
Ugh.
And, I talked about my California experience, and I will continue to do that with Governor Newsom, and how my wife's business got shut down and forced me to move, pick up my kids, get the hell out of Dodge. And we're, I'm no Joe Rogan or Ben Shapiro. It's going to take me a year to move.
Oh, I thought it was going to take you a year
hopefully
to strike
not longer.
$300 billion or $1 million deal with Spotify. I was going to be impressed.
maybe a $300 deal on Spotify. No, it's and we're working on doing that. But that got put me some label put on me, and I've never been that way. But I'm considered right wing because I simply say you're welcome here. If you're a Trump supporter, I'm not going to criticize you. You can come in and show your support. You know what? Trump supporters like Star Trek too. Republicans like Star Trek too. Libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, they like Star Trek. That's what we're talking about here. We just want to be welcome. And if you want to exchange a few ideas in the chat, that's fine, as long as you're respectful. I don't care. But that, simply talking to the other side now makes you the other side, then fine. And that's been my attitude, is fine. If I'm going to, if you're going to label me some way because I'll talk to somebody, label me however you want. They've been trying to label us forever, and they will do it if that's fine. And I'll just, if people want to come in and find out for themselves, just listen to what I have to say, find out for yourself. And if you don't like it, then that's cool. That's fine. That's your decision. But I try not to be anything but me. And that's how I've handled my politics. I hate having my political scorecard filled out for me. Yeah, it's a lot of extra work, but I like the work and go through, and voting's a total pain in the ass. It's all over the place with me, but and sure, probably a waste of time in California, but I do it anyway. And I think the one lesson we've all learned, whatever side you're on, is it's really important. Local elections are very, very important things. Yes. That I ignored completely just up until this year. It's just something I never took very seriously. My mind has completely changed on that one. That was my mistake. We'll never make it again, ever.
Are you you're leaving California to go to Texas? Is that your plan?
Texas, a red state, and it's and people get all kinds of crazy. Like, I want to go to a free state. And most of them are red. Now, there would be a couple of blue ones that seem somewhat chill, that maybe, but right now it's Texas because the land's cheaper. You're a little more free, and I can go live in the middle of the country, somewhere away. I'm not moving to a city, nowhere near a city. And just
Gary, I fully support you coming to Texas. I'm the welcoming party. I'm trying to get Carter to come here because there's already so many California people moving here anyway. And a lot of them are not coming with the right mindset. They're coming with the intention to change Texas. And so while I can't stop the flood of people, I would like to recruit the ones that I want.
Yeah, cool. I'll be there.
Please come.
And I won't vote like a Californian. I promise. I have promised over and over again. I don't vote like a Californian. I won't vote like a Californian. And I would even agree to not vote at all. But I gotta vote against all my fellow Californians. So you might want me to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really important.
California, I think, is going to get even worse because you've got, I forget the numbers, but it's something like, I want to say something horrible, like 15% of the taxpayers pay for like 80 or 90% of the revenue, something ridiculously skewed like that. And what you're seeing in California is a lot of these people like Elon Musk, or people that have massive amounts of money, people running companies, pulling out of California. And the governor's reaction is like, we'll just raise taxes on everyone else, and California is already massively in debt. I think just like I'm Gen X also. Growing up, everyone would say things happen in California first, and then they spread out to the rest of the country. And I think that is true. And the demise will happen in California first. The collapse will first happen in California. And I don't know. I'm starting to feel like we're getting pretty close, but maybe I'm just being overly cynical.
It's on its way.
I hope.
I don't know
right.
if we're close.
I hope we're not.
I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should be a little more worried. I'm not saying you are either. I'm just like, I'm not a black pill person.
I'll admit to being a little bit black
always think
pilled. I went from red to dark red to like burnt dark red, and I'm probably a little bit black pilled, especially after days like today, right? So
I'm trying to.
It's hard today.
But Carter, I'm giving Carter the God pill. It's just taking a while.
I'm shoving the
go.
libertarian pill down her throat, and she's trying to shove the God pill down my throat. We'll see how that goes.
I like most of that libertarian stuff, most of it, but not all of it. Some of it's they've been kind of crazy.
The party
lately,
itself is an absolute mess.
So,
I actually don't like using the word libertarian because it's not what I mean at all. It's just most normies. It's the easiest like go-to touch point to you know.
Yeah.
I basically what I mean is leave me the F alone and I'll leave you alone. Like that's what I want. How's that?
Yep. That's exactly what I want. I will not bother you as long as you don't bother me. Identify, do whatever the hell you want. As long as it makes you happy, just leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
And it's always been my attitude. And now, you know, God, you would not believe this, the crap we get. So I criticized Doctor Who, and somebody took the time to like write up a fake cease and desist letter to me twice. Twice.
What?
Yes. From a law firm that exists. Somebody filled out a whole fake cease and desist to threaten to sue me if I criticized the star of Doctor Who some more. I mean, that's the craziness that's out there. And it's like, I admire the effort, but I'm not like, wow. That was nuts. But you know, that's part of what we do. And it's something to laugh at, I guess.
Yeah, something to laugh at. Well, Gary, thank you so much for coming on and giving us the benefit of your time and your wisdom, and for being so patient with us with our tech problems. For anybody that wants to find you online, they can go to nerdrotic.com.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Nerdrotic.com and just Nerdrotic and YouTube is fine.
On YouTube. And you have a new clips channel that's called Neurotic Daily. Is that right? Which is really funny. I love what you guys are doing on that channel. So everybody check that one out too. Yeah,
Perry Chan does the editing on that channel. He is a master at what he does. So
yeah, they're really well edited.
He's been doing a good job.
They're good stuff and they're funny. So
we are working on. I just want to tell you before you go. I never heard of the Coof before I came on your show. I've learned so many things. and so I was thinking, since it's the 20s, we need a new revamped version of a 20s glossary, because they had all these. And so I was looking at an old 1920s glossary, and I'm going to give you a few more words you can use now that are from the 20s. If you want to talk about money, you can call it cabbage. If YouTube is demonetizing you, they're taking your cabbage away. And then we came up with our own for you're not allowed to talk about election fraud or any, I guess, presumably even any lawsuits pending about potential election fraud. So we're going to call that the Big Show. And I'll send you the rest.
Please send me. Yeah. And I'll pass that around.
Okay.
So we can get our new terms. Cabbage. I like cabbage.
Yeah, cabbage is a good one.
Yeah.
Keri's excellent at speaking 1920s if you ever want to have a conversation with her. And I can't carry on a conversation because it's like another language, but she's very, very good at it. So
hey Mac.
Yeah.
It's a silver lining of the new kind of prohibition, the prohibition against free speech. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
well, thank you again, Gary. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks
and
for having me on.
I would love to have you back at some point, but
sure.
Thank you so much for your patience and your thoughts.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, we have a deep content library that includes interviews with everyone from Mike Cernovich to Megan Murphy. So go check it out. If you'd like to see more, please consider supporting the show by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, at least for now, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space chat on Telegram. See you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized by the Cathedral. Pay no attention to it. For your protection, the following co-conspirators have been unpersoned and marked for cancellation. Any association with these individuals will result in placement on the naughty list and a lump of coal. Here's a fun fact. Failing to leave cookies for Santa Claus is now considered a form of fat shaming. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Did you know that distributing presents using a magical sled is unlawful without a valid license and may be subject to taxation? Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.